Hey guys, tonight we step into a world not of kings or castles, but of iron fire and fatigue. The air around you is thick, almost chewy with the smell of scorched leather sweat and soot. You're standing inside a forge, not one of those polished fantasy blacksmith shops from the movies, but a cramped, stifling cavern of heat and noise. There's no dramatic orchestral music here, just the hiss of steam and the relentless, almost punishing clang of hammer on metal. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you, especially if it's way too late and you should probably already be asleep. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You squint as sparks dance in the shadows. The forge is alive, breathing in bellows, exhaling bursts of flame. Iron glows a pulsing orange on the anvil, each hammer blow flattening it like an angry heartbeat. Your arms ache, your skin stings, and your ears ring with every strike. You've done this before, too many times. The walls of this shop are coated in years of grime, layered like the rings of a tree. A silent record of every tool, horseshoe and sword that's passed through your hands. Forget what you've seen on screen. This isn't a romantic slow-motion ballet of molten metal and glistening muscles. This is survival. This is obligation. The only music here is the groaning wood of the bellows and the grunt that escapes your lips every time you lift the hammer. Your boots stick to the floor not from magic, but from spilled pitch and sweat-soaked ash. A rat's nest hides behind the coal pile, and you've long since stopped being surprised when one scampers past your foot. Your clothes reek of sulfur and smoke, and you've developed a sixth sense for when the wind's about to shift and send a face full of grit your way. You work not because you love it, but because you must. This forge, dark, blistering, unforgiving, is your inheritance. Your father once stood where you do now, his hands just as rough, his cough just as wet. And before him, your grandfather. The cycle turns like the wheel of the sharpening stone, always grinding. Historians still argue whether most medieval blacksmiths were mere laborers or essential craftsmen wielding significant influence in village politics. But standing here, the only influence you feel is the weight of expectation pressing into your shoulders like a hot iron brand. The outside world doesn't see this place as sacred. They don't understand the scars burned into the stone or the scent of iron that never quite leaves your skin. They see smoke and noise, maybe grunt in thanks when their plow gets repaired, but they never stay long. They're not built for this heat, this rhythm, this pain. You weren't either, not at first. You remember your first time holding the hammer, too heavy, too awkward. You dropped it. It landed on your foot, and your father didn't scold you. He just looked away, disappointed. That was worse. You learned quickly after that. Pain has a way of educating. Now the hammer feels like an extension of your arm. You don't think, you just swing. The metal sings beneath each blow, and if you listen carefully, it almost talks back. Each ring a whisper of shape, of temperature, of resistance. A bead of sweat trickles down your spine and disappears into your belt. The forge fire roars, then settles as you pull back on the bellows, coaxing the embers like a dragon whisperer. In that glow, you see more than just flames. You see your lineage burning back at you. The tools on the wall, worn smooth from generations of grip, seem to watch in silence. You've lost count of the hours, the days, the years. Every joint creaks when you move, your knuckles cracked like dry bark. You sleep with your hands open palms, facing the ceiling because, even in dreams, they remember the hammer's weight. Your neighbors think blacksmiths are just brawny men with soot-covered faces and simple minds. Let them think it. Let them fetch your wares and pay in half-truths and coin that's always short by one piece. You reach for a rod of iron and thrust it into the coals. The flames engulf it eagerly, turning it cherry red. You count silently 1, 2, 3, and then pull it free. Sparks fly as you bring it to the anvil. The first strike is always the loudest. It echoes in your teeth. Somewhere in the village, a baby cries. Somewhere beyond the trees, a dog barks at nothing. But here in your forge, the world has narrowed to heat and rhythm. You strike again and again. The sun outside has long set. You didn't see it happen. Time is slippery here, melting like wax. You don't chase it. You endure it. Your only measure is how many blades you've shaped, how many horseshoes still sit in the pile waiting. You pour water on the hot iron, and it hisses in protest. Steam rises like a ghost. You lean on the anvil breath, ragged eyes burning. Another day nearly done. But the darkness never truly leaves. It clings to the rafters' pools, beneath the workbench, nestles in the creases of your skin. The forge is always hungry. And tomorrow it will want more. The sound hits you before the heat does a rhythmic thunder, echoing off stone walls, rattling through your bones like a war drum that never stops. The forge is awake again. You feel it before you see it. The dry slap of radiant heat on your face. The acrid kiss of smoke in your throat. Your boots crunch over grit and charcoal. Sparks fly from the mouth of the furnace as though it's spitting out stars. You grab the long-handled tongs and fish a glowing ingot from the coals. Your fingers, though calloused and numb, still feel the pulse of the metal like it has a heartbeat of its own. You place it on the anvil with a heavy clank, and then the hammer sings. Each strike sends a vibration up your arm. The hammer's wooden handle is slick with sweat, your knuckles swollen and stiff from years of repetition. You don't flinch anymore. You barely blink. The fire crackles, the iron hisses, and the muscles in your shoulders scream in silence. Behind you, a bucket of water steams quietly. The scent of hot metal, mixing with cool liquid, is almost nostalgic, like childhood and pain rolled into one. Because you remember when you were too small to lift the bellows, when your arms shook with the weight of your father's hammer, when every mistake meant more heat, more hours, and sometimes a belt across the back. Now the forge is yours, but it feels more like a sentence than an inheritance. Your hands move on their own. Position, strike, rotate, strike again. The edges begin to form. You're not just shaping metal, you're translating force into form, pressure into utility. A nail, a hinge, a blade. The world runs on what you make, but never pauses to thank you. Outside, birds chirp. Somewhere, someone's baking bread or yelling at goats. But inside, it's just you and the noise. And him. He stands in the corner, arms crossed, chin shadowed with soot. Your father's hammer rests on his shoulder like a scepter. His shirt is dark with sweat, but his voice is ice when he finally speaks. Again, you nod, you lift, you strike, because that's the rhythm you were raised on. Fire, metal, obedience. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths had apprenticeships as formalized as other guilds. But in your case, it was bloodline, not paperwork. You were born into this heat, this racket, this endless churning of raw ore into necessity. You never got to choose it, and neither will your son if you ever have one. The forge is not just a place, it's a presence, a character. It watches you, judges you, demands you. The roof timbers creak under years of ash. Rust curls around the hinges of the door like ivy. Every tool has its place, worn smooth by repetition. Your hands know each one like old friends, or old wounds. There's a lull, brief but golden. You lean on the anvil, feeling the sweat roll down your back, pooling at the waistband of your trousers. Steam rises from your bare arms. You wipe your forehead with a rag blackened beyond saving. Somewhere under the grime it used to be white. You glance at the wall where a cracked mirror hangs. Your reflection is a stranger jaw, clenched eyes rimmed with soot, a smear of ash across your cheek like war paint. You're young barely, but the forge has aged you in dog years. The old man speaks again. Not a compliment, not even a grunt, just next. You sigh. Reach for another rod. Dip it into the inferno. It glows like the sun. You hold your breath and begin again. Hammering isn't just noise, it's language. Tap tap means check alignment. Bang bang means flip the piece. That steady rhythm, that's comfort. That's mastery. That's survival. You don't think about the heat anymore. It's background like wind or rain. You know how to breathe shallow so the smoke doesn't claw at your lungs. You know how to roll your sleeves just high enough to avoid burns, but not so high the skin's exposed. The line between skill and instinct blurred long ago. A village child peeks in through a side window, eyes wide, mouth open. To them, you're a magician conjuring glowing metal into swords and shears. If only they knew. If only they felt the burns on your arms or smelled your bedding soaked in forge smoke. Another strike. A flick of the wrist. You press the blade to your nose, testing the temperature by scent. Alone, burnt iron not quite ready. Back into the fire it goes. The forge groans as wind slips through the gaps in the walls. The flames twist. For a moment, the shadows stretch long and strange. And you wonder if you'll ever escape this place. If there's anything beyond fire and noise and aching wrists. Then the hammer lands again and again. The forge doesn't remember your name, but it knows your blood. And that, unfortunately, is enough. You wake before dawn, the chill air pressing into your bones, as if to remind you that the fire's not yet lit. The coals in the hearth are dead, only gray dust and yesterday's ashes. But soon it'll burn again. It always does. Because that's what your family does. That's what you do. You run your hand along the wooden beam above the door as you pass, just like your father did. Superstition or muscle memory, you're not sure anymore. He always muttered something under his breath when he touched it. You never caught the words, just the weight they carried, like a prayer or a curse. Out in the small yard, you stack wood with practiced ease. Oak and pine split months ago, dried just right. You've learned how each one burns, how each smoke curls differently when caught in the light. This too is passed down, not in scrolls or ceremony, but in sideways glances and gruff commands. Your father's shadow looms large, even now, even gone. Historians still argue whether blacksmithing families truly dominated village economies, or merely limped along beside them. Either way, your lineage was tied to this anvil long before you were born. Your grandfather worked steel for the Lord's men. His father forged the first hinges for the village gate. And you shape nails and shoe horses and fix broken shears. You try not to think about how far the family flame has flickered. The hammer you use was your father's. Its handle bears a notch where his thumb always rested. You rest yours there too, whether out of comfort or obligation. That's how this trade works. Every blow echoes the one before. Every tool carries a ghost. There's pressure in that. Not the kind you can shake off with a shrug or a long walk in the woods. It lives under your skin coils in your stomach. You can feel it each time someone hands you a broken blade and says, "Your father could have fixed this." You nod. You don't correct them. You don't say what you're really thinking, that your father wasn't some magical smith king, that he made mistakes, and that you watched him cry once when he thought you were asleep. You don't say any of that. You just take the blade, go back to the fire, and try to make it whole again. The villagers still expect you to be him. Same strength, same silence, same worn leather apron, and disapproving scowl. You can't count how many times someone said he'd be proud after you finish a job. It doesn't feel like comfort. It feels like weight. And it's not just the forge. It's the house beside it, the narrow bed you grew up in, the same cracked wall where a storm split the plaster, the same shelf of tools he never let you touch. You live inside his shadow. You eat with his knife. You sleep with his cough still echoing in your ears. Sometimes when the wind howls just right through the slats in the roof, you hear his voice. Not in a spooky ghost story way. Just memory. Muscle memory. Keep your wrist loose, don't quench too soon. The fire isn't your friend, but it's better than most men. You smile at that one. He was right. You wish he'd taught you more with words, not just silence. You wish he'd explained why he stayed, why he didn't run when he still had the legs for it, why he let the trade chain him like a prisoner. Maybe he believed it was noble. Maybe he believed it was all he had. You're not sure what you believe yet, but every time you swing the hammer, you feel the burden, the inheritance no one asked for, the craft you didn't choose, the legacy wrapped in soot and scars. A boy from the village stops by in the afternoon, wide-eyed curious. He asks how you make the sparks fly like that. You want to tell him the truth, that it's not magic, just force, just fire and pain and repetition, but you don't. You nod. You say it takes practice, and you send him on his way. He might be you someday, or he might not. Maybe he'll run. You think about that sometimes, leaving, just walking away, letting the forge go cold, letting the tools rust, letting your father's hammer collect dust in a forgotten corner. But then someone knocks. A bent old woman with a pot lid that won't fit right. She smiles at you like you're a miracle worker. And you sigh, and you take the lid, and you light the fire again, because this is what you were taught. Not just how to work metal, but how to stay, how to endure, how to carry the weight of men who never asked if you wanted it. And until you decide otherwise, the hammer stays in your hand. You don't remember your first burn. Not really. There were too many. A fingertip brushed against a hot rivet, a wrist grazed the edge of the hearth, a forearm too slow to dodge a flaring ember. The pain was never new, it was just part of growing up. Like outgrowing clothes or learning to swim. Except instead of water, you learned fire. Your earliest memories are not of lullabies or wooden toys, they are of soot, of being small and constantly dirty, of playing with iron scraps instead of dolls or carved soldiers, while other children chased each other through fields and mud puddles. You sat in the corner of the forge with a chunk of coal in one hand and a dull chisel in the other, pretending you understood what your father meant when he said, "Watch carefully now." He was always saying that. Watch carefully. Never good job. Never well done. His affection, if you can even call it that, was doled out in silence and side glances. His love was the kind that handed you a heavy pair of tongs before your arms were long enough to hold them straight. The kind that told you to toughen up when the heat made you dizzy. The kind that didn't know how to say "I'm proud," so it just handed you a heavier load to carry. Historians still argue whether the children of tradesmen in the Middle Ages had any semblance of a childhood. Some believe they were treated as miniature adults, expected to work as soon as they could lift a tool. Others argue there was still time for laughter and play in the gaps between labor. For you, those gaps were razor thin, maybe non-existent. You remember watching the other boys from the window, your face smudged with ash, your hands raw from rubbing down the bellows shaft. They laughed freely. You only did that in your sleep, and even then rarely. You were expected to work beside your father by the time you were 9. Not help, not fetch tools. Work. You learned to tell iron from steel by the sound it made when struck. You learned how much pressure you could apply before metal cracked. You learned what it felt like to wake up sore every morning and still be told you were lazy. Your mother was gone before you could form full memories of her. All you recall is the smell of lavender and the faint softness of hands that didn't leave soot behind. Some nights after the forge quieted, your father would sit alone and stare at the fire for hours. He never said her name, never told stories. Her absence was treated like another fact of life, like rust or blisters. The only gift your father ever gave you was a small carved figure, a horse, roughly shaped, barely detailed. You didn't understand its value then. You do now. That figure took time to make. Time he didn't give to anything unless it could be sold, traded, or hammered into place. And he gave it to you. You kept it hidden in your straw mattress. Even now you sometimes find yourself holding it in your sleep fingers, tracing the ridges carved by a man who couldn't say he loved you out loud. Your training wasn't a ceremony. It was osmosis. You absorbed everything by being near him. The way he angled his elbows when pulling a blade from the fire. The way he tapped the anvil twice before a finishing strike. The curses he muttered when something went wrong. You learned not because he taught you, but because you had no other choice. You remember once asking to go with the other boys to the river. Just once. Just an afternoon. He looked at you like you'd grown a second head. The fire doesn't wait, he said. That was the end of it. Even now you can't swim. There was one summer when your cousin came to stay. He was your age, soft-palmed and wide-eyed, from a town far away. He stayed 2 weeks helping in the forge. By the end of it, he had blisters so bad he couldn't hold a cup. He went home crying. You didn't blame him. You envied him. He got to leave. You didn't. Years blur together when every day feels the same. You outgrew your father's shadow inch by inch, but never escaped it. Every time you thought about resisting, about saying no, or running off to be a sailor or a minstrel, you thought of the hammer, of the glowing metal, of the way your father's eyes lit up just a little when a piece came out perfect. Maybe that's why you stayed. There's still a part of you, small, buried, barely breathing, that remembers wanting to be something else, someone else. But it's muffled now, wrapped in years of smoke and clang and duty. The fire scorched that voice, not all the way maybe, but enough. And so your childhood ended before it really began. Not with a dramatic farewell or a tearful goodbye. Just another day at the forge. Another burn. Another silence. You didn't choose this life. You inherited it. The forge gives, but it takes more. That's the balance no one talks about. For every tool you shape, it shapes you right back, just not in the ways anyone wants to admit. You wake coughing. Not once, not twice. It comes in waves like your lungs are trying to claw something out. You sit up slowly, head spinning, throat raw. You taste ash. You always taste ash. It lines your tongue, clings to your teeth, and settles deep inside like a tenant that won't leave. Your blanket smells like smoke. So does your pillow. So does your skin. You shuffle to the water barrel and take a swig, the liquid lukewarm and faintly metallic. It helps barely. Outside, the first light of dawn creeps through the cracks in the shutters, casting soft beams that look too clean for a place like this. You stretch your shoulders, wincing as something pops. Your spine complains, every joint crackling like the surface of a dying fire. There's a stiffness in your knees that didn't used to be there, and a sharp twinge in your hips whenever you stoop too fast. You're young by most standards, but the forge doesn't care about numbers. It ages you by flame and fracture. You weren't born fragile. But you weren't built for this either. Nobody is. Historians still argue whether medieval blacksmiths suffered more chronic illness than other villagers. The records are sparse, mostly burial entries, and the occasional priest's note about a persistent wheeze. But standing here now, hand on your ribs, as you struggle to breathe deep, you don't need a historian to tell you this job is killing you. Slowly, methodically, like rust. The air in the forge is thick enough to chew. Coal dust swirls with every movement. Iron filings coat the floor like glitter for someone with very poor luck. You wear a cloth over your face when you remember to, but it barely helps. The smoke seeps through your pores, makes your eyes water, even when you're not crying. Sometimes late at night you hear yourself wheezing, not loud, just enough to keep you from sleep. It reminds you of your father. In his final months, he'd sit by the cold hearth hand, trembling a permanent cough, rattling in his chest like loose nails in a drawer. You offered water. He shook his head, said it wouldn't help, said nothing would. You believed him. Now you worry he was right. Your fingers, once nimble, have grown stiff and swollen. Some mornings you have to soak them in hot water just to close them around a hammer. And still you work, because no one's paying you to rest. No one's forging iron but you. Every strike of the hammer is a gamble. Will this be the blow that sends something twinging in your shoulder? Will this be the twist that locks your back for a week? Will this be the day your lungs simply give out? You don't say these things aloud. You wouldn't know who to say them to. The villagers wouldn't care. The few friends you had have long since moved on, married, farmed, or fled. They don't visit. Not anymore. They say it's the smell. You think it's the truth. So you suffer in silence. You cough into your sleeve. You stretch and limp and groan only when no one can hear. You tell yourself you're fine. You lie. One time you collapsed. Not dramatically, no theatrical swoon. Just a slow tilt forward, legs folding beneath you, face landing in a pile of metal shavings. You woke up minutes later, dizzy bleeding from a cut above your eye. No one saw. You cleaned it yourself. That's the way of it. There's a bottle of tincture a traveling apothecary sold you once. He said it would help with the breathing. You tried it for a week, made you vomit every night and see shapes in the fire that weren't there. You poured the rest into the latrine. It hissed like something angry. You keep the bottle, though, just in case, of what you're not sure. Your father used to say pain is proof you're alive. That's easy to say when you're not the one whose ribs feel like they're grinding together every time you lift a bar of steel. You wonder if he truly believed it, or if he just didn't know what else to say. The worst part isn't the pain. It's the slowness, the creeping decline, the realization that the forge is winning, that each day you're slightly less than you were the day before, that one day you'll wake up and simply won't be able to stand. And then what? Who keeps the fire lit then? There's no apprentice, no heir. You haven't dared bring a child into this. You barely keep yourself together, let alone another life. So you push forward, you lift, you hammer, you breathe shallow, you ration your strength like coins. And still the forge demands more. It always does. The clang of metal is satisfying, sure, but it doesn't feed you. The sizzle of quenching steel sounds impressive, but it doesn't fill your bowl. For all its fire and fury, the forge pays in trickles. And those trickles barely keep the roof from collapsing over your head. You wipe your hands on a scrap of leather, then hold them out, palms up to the merchant standing across from you. He frowns. That much, he says, like the price you named was a joke. It wasn't. It was already low. Too low. You don't respond, just stare. Eventually he sighs, digs into his pouch, and drops a few grimy coins into your hand. 2 are chipped. 1 might be fake. You don't argue. You just nod, take them, and tuck them into the box beneath your workbench. You're not proud. You're tired. Blacksmiths weren't rich. Not even close. You weren't making jeweled swords for royalty or suits of armor gleaming under banners. You were fixing broken plow blades and bent hinges, making nails by the dozen, selling them by the weight. Most days, people didn't even pay in coin, they paid in promises. I'll bring eggs next week. My cousin's got a pig he'll trade. We'll settle up next harvest. And sometimes they just didn't. And you didn't chase them, because what were you going to do? Swing a hammer at their heads you could, but then they'd stop coming. And broken hinges didn't walk themselves to the forge. Historians like to imagine tradesmen had solid, reliable income. Maybe in big towns under guild rules with ledgers and apprentices and quotas. But out here, in this tiny village where the only time coin changes hands is when the taxman shows up, you were lucky to get anything shiny at all. You remember one winter your worst. Snow crept into the forge through the gaps in the door, and your firewood ran out before the month was done. You burned the old stool, then the broken tools, then the wall planks from the lean-to. You wore gloves to bed, slept wrapped in every scrap of cloth you owned. Your breath turned to mist in the air, and you still worked, because a farmer needed new scythe teeth, and the baker's latch broke, and the midwife lost her shoe buckle. You charged what you could, but none of them had silver. One gave you a withered chicken. It died 2 days later. Another gave you eternal gratitude. That one you laughed at. Then you cried. There's blood on some of your coins. Not metaphorically, literally. From your hands cracked and raw. From your forearms burned and blistered. From the day you sliced open your palm on a jagged blade and kept hammering anyway. You wrapped it in cloth and made it through the job. The blade sold for half of what it should have. You still have the scar. The buyer probably lost the knife within a week. You never forget those kinds of trades. Once a traveling knight stopped by all armor and arrogance. His sword was chipped from some far-off skirmish. He needed it reforged. Promised to pay in gold, real gold. You worked through the night, nervous and hopeful, every strike of your hammer, powered by hunger and a foolish scrap of belief. He rode off with the sword before dawn. Said he'd send a courier with payment. That was 6 years ago. You learned your lesson. Now you ask for coin up front when you can, or at least a portion. You still get cheated. You still get begged. You still get talked down. But you've grown a little harder. Not just in the hands, but in the heart. And yet somehow you're still here. The forge still smolders. The bellows still wheeze. the anvil still rings. The roof leaks and the floor groans, and the food is plain, but you've survived. For now. Your clothes are threadbare. Your boots are patched so many times they barely resemble boots. You buy flour in handfuls, oil in drops meet, only when someone brings it by. Your tools are your treasure. Your anvil is your throne. Your hammer is your crown, cracked, splintered, and heavy as sin. Some nights, you count your coins by candlelight. Lay them out one by one, arranging them by size, by weight, by memory. You remember where each one came from, who handed it over, who didn't, the ones that jingled proudly and the ones that felt like pity. There's an old story the elders used to tell about a blacksmith who made a deal with a demon, traded his soul for unmatched skill, and used it to make weapons so perfect they cut through ghosts. The villagers loved him, paid him in gold and silk. He died rich, but cursed. You'd take that deal, not for the silk, not even for the gold, just to be recognized, just once, just to not have to haggle over a horseshoe with someone who thinks you're barely above a mule. You sigh. Place the coins in your box, close it gently, then pick up the hammer. The next job is already waiting. Morning again. The kind of morning that blurs into yesterday. You wake up before the sun not because you're disciplined, but because your body simply doesn't understand rest anymore. You sit on the edge of the bed, rubbing your eyes, joints creaking like old hinges. It's still dark, the room cold. The embers in the hearth are dead. No smoke, no flame. Just silence, but not for long. You drag yourself to the forge. Strike flint to kindling. Breathe life into the coals. Your breath is visible in the air, a ghost escaping your mouth with every exhale. The fire catches slowly, as reluctant as you feel, flaring orange, then settling into the familiar dull roar. You sit beside it, letting the heat seep into your bones. For a few minutes, it feels like you might never have to move again. Then you remember the blade from the miller needs reshaping. The blacksmith's rhythm doesn't allow for pause, so you rise and begin. Forge, eat, sleep, repeat. That's the loop, the shape of your life. Not weeks, not seasons, just tasks, endless tasks. You can't remember the last time you took a day off. Not really. Maybe when you fell and bruised your ribs. Even then you kept shaping nails from your stool. The forge is a living thing. If you leave it alone too long, it punishes you. Tools rust, orders pile up, people start whispering. You don't get to pause. You only get to keep going. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths lived by choice or compulsion, whether they were respected artisans or just convenient laborers hidden behind a curtain of smoke. Whatever the case, your reality is simple. You are necessary but not important. Respected from a distance, needed but never celebrated. They bring you work, they take the product, they nod. No fanfare, no thanks, just the cycle. By midday, the sweat is dripping down your spine. You've barely eaten just a heel of stale bread dipped in broth. Your stomach growls as you pump the bellows sparks licking your arm hairs. You don't stop. You can't. Because stopping means thinking. And thinking means noticing the weight. Each day stacks onto the last like bricks on your shoulders. You remember when they were manageable, when the work was heavy, sure, but not crushing. Now the weight doesn't just bend your back, it dulls your spirit. You try to remember anything that made today feel different than yesterday. The way the light hit the wall, the way the tongs felt in your hand, a different smell from the village kitchens, maybe nothing sticks. Days fold into each other, identical and endless. The worst part, no one sees it. They see the results. The horseshoes nailed on straight, the axe heads sharp enough to shave bark. But they don't see you, not the real you. The one who dreams of something more than metal and fire. Because yes, you do dream. Not often, and never out loud. But there are moments, small and fleeting, where your mind drifts. You think about fields, or ships, or roads that lead somewhere far from here. You imagine waking up without smoke in your lungs. Imagine silence without hammer blows. You imagine ease. But then the iron starts to cool too fast, and you're yanked back into the heat. The metal doesn't care about dreams. It only cares about precision, about rhythm, about strength. Sometimes, when the forge is quiet at night and the village sleeps, you step outside and just breathe, or try to. The stars are clearer out here. You tilt your head back, neck stiff, eyes blurry. You look at the constellations and think about how old they are, how steady, how far away. You wonder if anyone else is doing what you're doing right now. Hammering late, breathing in smoke, counting blisters. You wonder if you're alone in this grind, or if there's some strange comfort in knowing others are trapped in their own forges too. The night is short. The fire never fully goes out. You lie down for a few hours, but your mind keeps working. You think about unfinished orders. You think about debts. You think about the wheel, how it turns and turns and turns. And when the sun begins to rise again, weak and pale, through soot-streaked windows, you stand up. You wash your face. You stoke the fire. And you start all over. There's a moment, brief, so brief it might as well be a blink, when you pause at the forge and realize your hands have moved without you. The hammer's still swinging, the tongs still rotate, but your mind, it's somewhere else. Floating above the anvil, drifting past the soot-dark beams of the ceiling, wondering, why? Why are you still doing this? You've never asked out loud, not once. But the question's always been there, curled in the back of your mind like an ember refusing to die. It burns brightest in the quiet moments, when the fire dims, when the work slows, when the ache in your bones sharpens, just enough to make you wonder what it's all for. Duty, sure. Tradition. The old songs sung without melody about strength and legacy and the honor of labor. But deep down, some voice small, tired, a little hoarse, starts whispering, what if that's just a story? What if it's a story someone made up to keep you swinging the hammer? You think of the road out of town. Not much of a road, really, more of a winding suggestion, a path carved by wagon wheels and occasional wanderers. You've seen it. You've stood at its edge. You've even taken a step or two down it once late at night, when the moon was fat and the fire had gone cold. You didn't go far, just enough to taste the air. It smelled like pine, like maybe something else was possible. You returned, of course. You always do. Historians still argue whether craftsmen in small villages had true agency, or were bound by expectations too thick to cut, whether those who stayed behind the anvil did so from loyalty or fear. You don't need parchment or ink to know how sticky fear can be. It clings to your ribs. It makes comfort out of repetition, even when the repetition is a cage. There are days when you feel something rising in you. Not anger, not sadness. Just restlessness. Like your soul is pacing in circles inside your chest, knocking against the bars. You look at your tools and feel both love and resentment. You touch the hammer and think this is who I am. Then think this is all I am. You imagine what life might look like beyond this. You see yourself by a river building something from wood instead of iron, or on a ship sails snapping above salt on your lips, or even in a crowded city making hinges by the 1,000 anonymous yes, but maybe anonymous sounds like freedom. But then the image fades, and you're left holding a hot blade that needs finishing, and the familiar hiss of steel and water drowns the thought. Sometimes, though, you test the boundaries. You leave a job unfinished overnight just to see if the world falls apart. It doesn't. Sometimes you let a blade cool unevenly just to hear it crack. Sometimes you don't light the forge right away. You sit by the cold hearth and stare at your hands counting scars, wondering which ones are worth it. You haven't told anyone what you're feeling. Not the baker who smiles too easily. Not the old man who brings broken tools. Not the young ones who ask questions with bright eyes. They wouldn't understand, or worse, they would. Because what if everyone's tired just like you? What if every smile hides a sigh? What if the whole village is just pretending not to notice the weight of it all? You think of your father. How quiet he was in his last years. How still. You used to think it was wisdom. Now you wonder if it was surrender. There's a bench near the forge door where you sometimes sit when the day winds down. From there you can see the hill beyond the village. It's not tall, but tall enough to offer a view of things beyond. You've never climbed it, not once. You could. You've thought about it. But every time something stops you, duty, tradition, or maybe just habit, one evening a storm rolls in. Thunder rumbles, distant but insistent. You're at the forge, but you've stopped working. You're just standing there staring into the fire. It roars oblivious, uncaring. The heat kisses your cheeks. The light flickers against the walls. And you think, what would happen if I let it go out? Just for a day, just to see. Your hands twitch, aching to move, to lift, to strike. But your heart is somewhere else entirely. Somewhere quieter. Somewhere that doesn't stink of coal and guilt. You want something. You don't even know what it is. Only that it's not this. Not exactly this, not forever. But the fire needs tending. And so once again you feed it. They nod when you pass them in the square. That sort of half-respectful, half-dismissive nod, reserved for people whose usefulness outweighs their status. No one ever crosses the street to greet you, not unless they've got something broken in hand. A bent blade, a snapped hinge, a question about iron. That's when they remember you. The rest of the time, you're just the blacksmith. They know your name, sure, but it's your title they use. Not in honor, just convenience. The blacksmith. Like you're a tool, not a man. a fixture of the village hammered into place and expected to stay there unchanging until you rust away. You don't dress like them. Your clothes are always smudged, streaked with oil, soaked with sweat. Your hair is singed at the ends from leaning too close to the forge. Your nails are blackened, your skin rough. You don't attend the festivals unless someone twists your arm. You don't go to market unless you absolutely must. When you do, the glances come fast and subtle, up, down, then away, like they're afraid your soot might be contagious. Once a visiting priest called your trade noble labor, said it with a thin smile, then moved his robes away from your apron like he was avoiding a puddle. You remember the way he shook your hand, just his fingertips, like you were holding a live coal. Historians still argue whether medieval blacksmiths were honored as skilled artisans or kept at the edge of social circles, tolerated for their utility and little else. Here in your village, the answer is clear. They need you, but they don't want you. The children are the only ones who speak to you without caution. They linger by your door, eyes wide, faces smudged with curiosity. They ask about swords, about dragons, about how hot the fire gets. You humor them sometimes. You tap the anvil with a wink, tell them hot enough to scare the cold out of winter. They laugh. Then their mothers call them away. You overheard one of them once, one of the mothers. Don't linger too long near the forge. It's not a place for good children. You pretended not to hear, just like you pretend not to notice when the baker skips your stall at festival, or when the elders lower their voices as you pass. They don't understand what you do. Not really. To them, it's just hammering and smoke. A dirty job. Something base. Something below them. They don't see the precision, the control. The way the metal must be read like language. The way it bends, responds, resists. They don't see the danger, the discipline. Just the grime. You fixed nearly every door in this village. Repaired their tools, shod their horses, mended the iron gate that keeps the forest at bay. And yet, you're still the man they glance past at gatherings. The one they call on only when they have no choice. You remember one winter, the miller's son broke his leg fallen on the ice. No healer was near. They brought him to you desperate. You didn't question. You splinted the leg using timber scraps, bound it with leather straps, held him while he screamed. You still remember his tears, his small hand gripping your arm like a lifeline. He healed, walks with barely a limp now. They never thanked you. You don't expect thanks anymore, not really. But sometimes you wonder what it would be like to be seen, not just needed, not just tolerated, seen, understood. Your father used to say, they respect the fire, not the man who stokes it. You never understood that when you were young. You do now. Sometimes you watch them out in the fields in the square walking to chapel. Their lives seem lighter. Not easier maybe, but freer. They laugh more. Their clothes stay clean. Their hands don't bear the same permanent stains. You wonder what they say when you're not around. You've heard whispers, of course. That you're strange. That you talk to the fire. That your forge never truly goes out even in the dead of night. They build stories around you, little myths, to explain the soot and the silence. It's easier for them to invent than to understand. And maybe you let them. Maybe it's safer that way. Still, every so often someone sees past the ash. A traveler maybe who watches your hands and says, "That's fine work." A child who gasps when the blade flashes bright from the quench. Or someone whose voice softens when they say, "Your name, not your title." You hold on to those moments. Let them settle inside you like cooled iron, rare, solid, and real. You are judged from afar always, but sometimes briefly you are known. You don't wear gloves. Never have. They get in the way. Blunt your grip, dull your sense of pressure. Hide the heat until it's too late. Know your hands are your tools, and they look like it. The skin is no longer skin. It's a mosaic of hardened ridges, cracked knuckles, and burns both fresh and faded. Your palms are thick as old leather split, at the creases dark with soot that never fully scrubs out. The calluses don't stop at your fingertips. They climb your wrists, marking every inch of you that's ever dared to grip a blade, still glowing red. Your fingers are permanently curled, as if even at rest they're still remembering the shape of the hammer. Your nails are uneven. Some are split. One's blackened from the time you dropped a rivet set and didn't move fast enough. You used to be embarrassed. Now these hands are your resume, your badge, your defense. If anyone ever doubts your place, your craft, your worth, you just hold up your palms. Let them see. Let them understand. Maybe they won't. Historians still argue whether the physical scars of laborers were seen as symbols of pride or of pity. But here, where no one bothers to ask, your hands simply speak for you. Loudly if anyone's paying attention. There's a scar across your left thumb, long and shiny, where you slipped with a chisel during your second year in the forge. You wrapped it in cloth and kept working. The blood mixed with the steel that day. You tell yourself that blade was stronger for it. Another across your knuckles, jagged from a quarrel with a stubborn piece of iron that refused to bend. You won that fight, but the metal took a piece of you with it. Fair trade, you suppose. On cold mornings, your fingers don't want to move. You have to massage life back into them, bending each joint slowly one by one, until they remember what they're for. Even then, the ache never quite leaves. It lives under your skin, next to the old splinters and half-forgotten injuries you never bothered to name. You once showed your hands to a young boy who asked why they look so strange. You turned them over slowly, let him see the ridges, the burns, the black streaks under your nails. "This is what happens when you work hard," you said. He blinked, then asked, "Does it hurt?" You paused, thought about lying, then just nodded. The forge doesn't forgive. It teaches through pain. You learn not to flinch when the sparks bite. You learn to grip tight when your muscles scream. You learn to keep working even when your knuckles split and bleed and stick to the leather of your hammer strap. Your body is a ledger. The forge writes in it daily. It's not just your hands either. Your arms bear faded burns. Your shoulders creak. Your knees buckle a little more each month. You walk with a slight hitch, now one foot turned ever so slightly outward. No one notices. Or maybe they do and don't say. But it's the hands that carry the message. They're what people see when you pass tools, when you accept payment, when you lift a cooled blade and present it like a finished prayer. They are not soft. They are not pretty. They are not clean. They are yours. You once had a lover. Briefly. A summer thing. She liked your strength. Said your hands made her feel safe. But she flinched the first time you touched her cheek lightly, gently, but with palms that felt like stone. You tried to explain. She said nothing, but she didn't return. Since then, you've kept your hands to yourself. At night, you sometimes stare at them in the firelight. They look older than the rest of you, more honest. They don't lie about how hard you've worked or how long you've stayed. They don't try to be anything they're not. You take care of them in your way. You soak them in vinegar when the blisters threaten infection. You clip the nails with your belt knife. You flex them when they start to stiffen, stretch them when they ache. You whisper small thanks when they still do what you ask. Because no matter what breaks in your body, your back, your shoulders, even your lungs, so long as your hands hold, you can keep going. So long as they don't quit, neither do you. They've earned that respect. And if anyone ever doubts your story, your life, you'll just show them your hands. Let them read the truth in every scar. The forge isn't the only thing burning. You thought it was thought the glow that lit your skin and singed your lashes came solely from the coals, from the hearth that never rests. But some nights when the work is done and the fire dies to embers, something else still smolders inside you. Something hotter, wilder, not easily named. Is it passion, habit, rage? You don't know. You only know that it keeps you from walking away. You lie awake long after the village sleeps, staring at the ceiling, listening to the creak of cooling beams and the rustle of mice in the corner. You shift under your blanket not from cold, but from restlessness, that itch behind your ribs. The feeling like you're meant to do something, be something more. And yet every morning you get up and feed the fire again. Historians still argue whether such tradesmen were driven by pride or simply trapped by routine. Whether it was love or inertia, maybe it's both. Maybe it's neither. Maybe the fire within is the same as the fire on the anvil. If you don't keep hammering it, it cools into something hard and bitter. There are times when the work consumes you completely. You'll start on a blade in the gray morning, and by the time you lift your eyes, the shadows are long and the birds are quiet. Your hands work without thought. The metal bends, folds, sings under your touch. It's a trance one you never asked for but have learned to crave. In those moments, you forget everything else. The pain, the judgment, the poverty, even your name. There is only fire, iron, motion, and maybe a flicker of joy. You tell yourself that's what keeps you going. That the satisfaction of a well-made piece, the perfect curve of a newly formed edge, is enough. That the craft itself is sacred, worthy, alive. But sometimes you wonder if that's just another story you've forged to make peace with the heat. You think of your father eyes, bloodshot, from years of smoke hands trembling near the end. He rarely smiled. But on the rare occasions when a job came out just right, when a blade rang like music or a hinge moved like silk, he'd pause, let his eyes rest on the work. And for a moment something bright would flicker across his face. Not quite happiness, something older. Maybe that was his fire. You try to find it in yourself. You watch the glow of the coals, see your reflection in the steel, listen to the sound of your hammer in the still night. You tell yourself, this is enough. But then the wind shifts. You catch a scent, wet earth, wood smoke, pine. And suddenly you're not in the forge anymore. You're on that road you've never taken, the one that leads away. The fire inside flares, not hot like anger, but sharp, urgent. Is it telling you to leave or to keep going? There's no answer, not yet. And so you stay. One evening you forge a small knife just for yourself. No client, no payment, just the need to shape something that belongs to you alone. You take your time, let the steel cool slow, hone the edge until it sings. The handle fits your grip perfectly. For once, it feels like you've made something that understands you. You don't sell it. You keep it on the wall above your bed. A reminder that the fire within doesn't always have to consume. Sometimes it can create. Sometimes it can be a guide. You still question. You still ache. You still stand at the threshold of dreams you're afraid to chase. But the flame inside you hasn't gone out. Not yet. And as long as it burns, you'll keep forging. Keep breathing. Keep hoping. Even if you don't know what you're hoping for. It begins like any other early gritty quiet. You wake with a grunt, feet hitting the floor before your eyes even adjust to the gray light, creeping through the shutters. The forge is still asleep, cold and mute. But you know how to wake it. You always do. You go through the motions, kindling flint breath, the ritual of resurrection. The hearth glows again obedient, and then footsteps. You hear them before you see him, firm, measured. Not the hurried gait of a farmer or the slouching stroll of a local. This is something else, a presence. Your gut tightens instinct sharper than a fresh honed blade. He steps through your doorway like he owns it. Tall, broad-shouldered, cloak pinned with polished brass. A sword at his hip, not decoration, but weight he used. His face is shadowed by a hood, but you catch the gleam of authority in his eyes. Blacksmith, he says. You nod, cautious. He doesn't offer his name, doesn't need to. He unfastens a cloth-wrapped bundle from his belt and places it on your work table with surprising delicacy. The wrap falls away. Inside, a broken sword. Old but beautiful. The steel is different, foreign. The hilt bears markings you don't recognize, curving symbols like waves or fire. The break is clean, almost surgical, as if something sheared it, not snapped it. Can you reforge it, he asks. You touch the blade, fingers brushing the edge. It hums beneath your skin, not metaphorically, not imagined. It actually hums. You glance up. He's watching you closely. You ask, what's it for? He doesn't blink. A reckoning. That's all he says. Historians still argue whether wandering knights or envoys sought out village blacksmiths for special commissions, or whether those were tales forged later in ballads. But you're not in a ballad. You're standing in your smoke-stained forge, staring at a blade. that feels like it doesn't belong in this world. You clear your throat. This will take time. He nods. You have 3 days. Your heart skips. 3 days. You should say no. You should explain that reforging something this delicate, this strange, isn't just difficult, it's dangerous. One mistake and the whole thing could shatter, or explode, or do something you don't have a word for. But something inside you, some buried glowing core whispers, say yes. So you do, and just like that, the rhythm shifts. The stranger pays in advance real silver, heavy and clean. You've never held this much wealth. He doesn't haggle, doesn't ask for proof. Just turns and leaves boots, crunching gravel, his silhouette disappearing into the morning haze. The sword remains, and the silence it leaves behind is deafening. You sit for a long time, staring at the broken blade. You touch the steel again. It's warm. Not from the forge, from itself. You have no idea what kind of metal this is. Not iron, not steel, at least not entirely. You hold it to the light. It catches it differently, absorbs it, as if it remembers something. You think of your father. What would he have said? Too risky, not worth the trouble, stick to nails. But he's not here, you are. And maybe this is your moment, the one that breaks the cycle. You clean the blade with trembling fingers, every motion careful, reverent. You prepare your tools. The forge burns hot today. You feed it with dry oak and new coal, pumping the bellows until the heat glows white-blue. You draw the blueprint in your mind. You don't sketch, it wouldn't help. This work requires instinct, patience, precision. You don't eat, you barely drink, you move like someone possessed. The first day is just preparation. Learning the blade's language, listening to its fractures, mapping its temper. You sleep with it near you, not trusting to leave it alone. It whispers in your dreams. On the second day, you begin. You heat it slowly, gradually, the way you would with brittle glass. You use the smallest hammer, the one with the worn grip. Every tap is a prayer. Every spark a promise. By sunset, your arms are shaking your face, streaked with soot, and something more, something closer to awe. The blade is holding, not resisting, not rejecting you. It's letting you help. You laugh once, soft and strange. It sounds like someone else. The third day looms like a mountain, and still you climb. You rewrap the hilt, carving symbols you don't understand, copying the old ones perfectly. You balance the blade, test its weight, refine its edge until it sings with every pass. You've never made anything like this. Never touched anything that felt this alive. And you're terrified. Because when he returns, when the stranger with the storm-worn cloak and sword-calloused hands steps back into your forge, he will judge you. And in that moment, your entire life may shift. Or maybe it won't. But the fire within tells you this is no ordinary day. This is a turning point. The blade rests on the anvil whole again. You stand over it, arms limp, legs weak, heart pounding like you've just run from one end of the village to the other. You've barely slept, barely eaten, but the sword is complete. not just repaired, transformed. It gleams with a quiet menace, the edge so clean it hums if you hold it right. The hilt is tighter than it was before, rewrapped with new leather over the old bones. The symbols, whatever they mean, shine faintly in the forge light. You run a finger just above the edge, not touching, just feeling. And for a flicker of a second, it feels like the sword breathes. The door creaks open. He's back. The stranger enters with the same calm, unreadable face. His cloak is damp with mist. There's mud on his boots. His eyes go first to the anvil. They stay there. He crosses the room slowly. No words. Just a long look at the weapon. Then he picks it up careful, like it might bite. He holds it to the light, turns it, weighs it, swings it once in a wide arc that cuts the silence in half. The blade whistles. He nods, barely. It's better than it was, he says. Your knees almost give out from relief. You hide it, barely. Then he adds, but now it will draw attention. He turns to you. Are you ready for that? The question hangs in the air. You blink. What do you mean? He sheathes the sword, the leather scabbard clicking softly. That blade isn't just steel, it carries meaning. Power. People will come looking. Not for me, for you. You feel your mouth go dry. I'm just a blacksmith, you say. No, he replies, you're not anymore. Historians still argue whether great craftsmen chose their fates or were dragged into them. Whether destiny arrives with fanfare or just walks through the door like a customer. You didn't ask for this. You didn't set out to make a name, but the work speaks, and now it won't be silent. The stranger gives you one last look, then turns to leave. At the door, he pauses. They'll offer coin, glory, favor, maybe more. They'll also lie, threaten. Some will want what you made. Some will want you. He pulls his hood up. Choose wisely. And he's gone. You stand in the fading heat of the forge. Heart a battlefield of pride and fear. The blade is gone, but something remains in its place, something weighty and invisible. A shift. A question. What now? You could go back to nails, hoof shoes, bent tools, and meager pay. You could retreat into the routine that shaped you, soothed you, scarred you, pretend none of this happened, or you could step into the unknown. There's already a knock before nightfall. A cloaked man with a pouch of coin. He wants a dagger with presence. You turn him away. You're not ready. Not yet. But you don't close the door. You sit by the fire staring into it, thinking. The forge is quiet, but inside you something stirs. A new hunger. Not for gold or glory, but for purpose, for precision, for meaning. You find yourself sketching. Not on parchment, on the table with charcoal. New shapes, new symbols, ideas you didn't know you had. The hammer is in your hand again before you realize you've picked it up. And that's when it hits you, you have a choice now. Not just in metal, but in meaning. You can stay, or you can create something new. Both paths burn. But only one leads forward. You don't sleep. Not properly. Not deeply. You lie in bed, the blanket twisted around your legs, your eyes fixed on the ceiling, seeing shapes in the beams above you, shadows of thoughts you can't shake. Your body begs for rest, but your mind won't obey. It races. The stranger is gone, the sword is gone, but their absence echoes louder than any hammer strike you've ever thrown. You turn over hoping sleep might be hiding on the other side of the pillow. No luck. The fire in the forge may have gone out for the night, but something inside you still burns, still stirs, still whispers. It plays back in your head the way the stranger held the reforged blade. The weight of his words, the sharp glint in his eyes when he said, "Choose wisely." You repeat it over and over like a curse or a prophecy. You don't even know which. Was this your father's feeling? Did he lie awake like this, wondering if he'd chosen wrong by sacrificing everything for the trade? Or was he simply resigned so deep in the pattern that questions like these stopped occurring to him? You'll never know. He didn't leave journals, just tools, just habits, just the forge still blackened with his ghosts. Your back aches. You sit up, swing your feet to the floor, stare at the cold hearth. You could lie back down, close your eyes again. But the doubts would be there too, waiting, pacing. So you rise. You dress. You walk barefoot through the darkened shop, the floorboards whispering old secrets. You light a candle. It flickers like your thoughts. On the bench, charcoal sketches, ideas, not commissions, dreams, curves and angles for blades that don't yet exist, hilts shaped for hands. You've never held patterns that came to you as you worked on a stranger's sword. Inspiration has arrived uninvited, and now it refuses to leave. Historians still argue whether true creativity can bloom in solitude, in labor, in poverty, whether genius requires freedom, or if it's forged like you in the quiet desperation between duty and desire. You're beginning to believe it's both. You pull your apron on just in case. You're not planning to work. You're just going to sit at the forge. Maybe stare at it for a while. Maybe think. Maybe touch the tools again. But your fingers move on their own. You don't light the fire. Not yet. You don't need it. You just hold the hammer. Let its weight anchor you. It feels heavier tonight, not in your hand, but in your mind. Every dent on its head is a reminder of jobs, finished mistakes, made lessons learned under pressure. You close your eyes. The forge is dark, but you see light. Not the glow of embers, something older, brighter. That day years ago when your father first handed you this hammer, no speech, no praise, just the weight massed down. That was the moment, wasn't it? The moment you stopped being a boy. You never told him you were scared. You wish you had. You open your eyes. It's almost morning. The light through the cracks in the roof is turning silver. Birds stir outside. Somewhere in the village, someone is beginning their day. You haven't ended yours. You lean on the workbench, chin on your forearms, eyes heavy but still open. And just when you think you might finally doze off, another memory rises. His face. The stranger, the sword. That moment of silence before he spoke. The weight in his voice when he said, "They'll come for you." And you believe him. You do. Because something has changed. Inside you, around you, you can feel it. A choice has been made. Maybe not aloud. Maybe not even consciously. But the act itself, remaking that blade, breathing life into steel that should have stayed broken, was the start of something. You didn't just repair a weapon. You challenged the quiet order of your life. And now you wait. You wait for the knock on the door, for the next commission, for the next test, but mostly you wait for sleep. It doesn't come. Not tonight. The sun hasn't cleared the rooftops yet, but the forge is already alive. You fed it early before the birds, before the village began its daily murmurs. The coals glowed with anticipation, as if they too sensed something different in the air. This isn't like the other jobs. You've taken up your tools 1,000 times, but today, the hammer feels like it hums. The metal before you isn't special, just steel, but your grip is tighter, your stance firmer. There's something in you, something fierce, something clear. A line has been crossed. You're not forging for survival today. You're forging for yourself. The shop is quiet, save for the crackle of fire and the rasp of metal drawn from coals. You stand still a moment, feeling the warmth spread across your skin. You close your eyes, breathe in deep. The air smells like purpose, like iron and oak smoke, like the start of something. And then you move. You set the billet on the anvil, square it, lift the hammer. The first strike is thunder. Steel flattens, spreads. You pivot, rotate. Strike again. Rhythm finds you. Not the old rhythm of obligation, but a new tempo, one that answers not to duty, but to will. Each blow carves more than shape. It carves identity, a new one. One that isn't tethered to your father's shadow or the village's quiet judgment. You're not thinking anymore, just doing, flowing, dancing in your own way. Historians still argue whether legendary weapons were shaped by talent, by accident, or by something divine. You don't believe in gods, not strongly. But today, something is guiding your hand. Whether it's memory instinct or sheer hunger, you let it lead. You heat the steel again, watching the glow rise from within a dull red that blooms into yellow. You check the grain, listen for its voice. Yes, there, you quench it. The hiss is a scream. You don't flinch. You wait. Then lift it out, dripping, steaming alive. The edge isn't perfect yet. You refine it with a whetstone gentle strokes that reveal the blade's quiet sharpness. You polish it until it gleams, not ostentatiously, just enough to reflect your face and something behind your eyes that wasn't there yesterday. You carve a symbol near the hilt, not one from your father's tools, not one from any old commission, a new one, yours, a mark no one else will recognize, not yet. Outside, the village hums with its normal rhythm. But inside your forge, the world has shifted. You cradle the finished blade in your palms, feeling its weight, its balance. This isn't just a tool. It's a declaration. This is what you can do when no one's watching, when no one's demanding, when no one's telling you what it must be. This is what happens when you forge without chains. The heat lingers in your veins. You set the blade down gently, almost reluctantly. Your hands are trembling not with fatigue, but with energy, the aftershock of having poured every part of yourself into something that now exists where before there was only raw material. And now you wait, not for approval, not for coin, for the feeling to settle, for the moment to sink in, for your heart to catch up. You sit at the bench, soaked in sweat chest, rising and falling like bellows. Your arms ache, your fingers twitch, but your mind is clearer than it has ever been. You've done something irreversible, not just the blade, yourself. You've shown what you are, what you could be, and maybe just maybe what you were meant to become all along. The fire still burns behind you, quiet now, content, like it understands. The blade doesn't stay hidden for long. It never had a chance, really. You weren't exactly subtle. Word spreads slow at first, like sap rising through a tree, but soon the whispers grow roots. They become glances, then visits, then questions too pointed to ignore. You didn't name the blade. It wasn't meant for a client. It wasn't even meant to be seen. But now it has an audience, a reputation, a life of its own. It starts with the merchant's son. He stops by, eyes wide, voice cautious. Is it true you made a sword that sings? You don't answer, but you don't deny it either. Then a pair of guards. The kind who normally sneer at your soot-covered face, now leaning in too close, asking what kind of alloy you used, what tempering technique, how you balance the edge so fine. You offer nothing, just a look. And they leave, but not without taking the shape of the blade in their memory. By week's end, you get your first offer. A nobleman, not local, arrives with a small entourage and too many rings on his fingers. He calls you master and waves coin like it's incense. He wants a blade just like the one. You know exactly which one he means. You shake your head. You don't explain. He leaves angry, that's fine. The next man isn't so polite. He comes at night alone, asks if the blade is still here, offers gold, then threats. He has a scar on his cheek and the quiet confidence of someone who's buried people. You keep a hand near the hammer under the bench. He leaves eventually, but the air feels tighter afterward. Your skin itches. Historians still argue whether famed craftsmen were targeted for their talents or protected by the status their work granted them. You're quickly learning it can be both. Fame is a beacon, but it casts shadows too. And now you're standing in one. You start sleeping with a blade nearby, not the special one. Just something sharp. Old habit revived by new worries. You reinforce the door. You stop working after dusk. But the forge doesn't sleep. Even when it's cold, it feels like it remembers. The heat lingers. The blade's creation has changed the air inside. The way the shadows gather. The way the silence feels heavier. One morning there's a new face in the crowd. A woman cloaked and quiet. She doesn't speak until you acknowledge her. When you do, she nods once and says, "You know what you've made, don't you?" You want to say no. You want to believe it was just a good piece, nothing more. But something in her tone, something in the way she watches your hands, tells you the truth. This wasn't just a weapon. It was a signal, a flare lit in iron and fire. And now others are watching. She warns you more will come. Some curious, some desperate, some violent. People who believe blades like that belong in temples or vaults or battlefields, not in the hands of a village smith with calloused fingers and no noble blood. She tells you to hide it or leave or prepare to defend it. You ask, what would you do? She shrugs. I'd melt it down. You don't, because even now, with the weight of attention pressing against the walls of your little forge, with eyes in every alley, you can't bring yourself to destroy what you made. That blade is proof of what you can do, of who you might be. It's the only thing in your life that didn't come from obligation, but it has a cost. The villagers change. Their eyes linger longer. Conversations pause when you approach. You used to be invisible unless they needed you. Now you're something else. Respected, feared, envied, all of the above. You want to believe that craftsmanship should speak for itself, that a blade is just a blade. But people don't work that way. They project meaning. They assign value. They covet. They judge. And now your work has become dangerous. Not because it's flawed, because it's flawless. And nothing draws fire like perfection. The forge is quiet. Not dead, never that, but subdued. Like it's holding its breath. Like it knows something is coming. You sit by the cold hearth hands in your lap. The special blade nowhere in sight. You moved it days ago. Not far. Just far enough. A hiding place no one else would think to look, a cracked floorboard beneath the cot, wrapped in oilcloth and silence. But you still feel its presence. Like a phantom limb, it tugs at your thoughts, reminds you of itself in the rhythm of your steps, the shape of your dreams, the sudden hush that falls when you enter a room. They're waiting for your next move. The villagers, the strangers, the ones who want your craft and the ones who fear it. They're all watching now, waiting to see whether you'll stay the same or become something new. And the decision weighs heavier than any hammer you've ever lifted. Your days are full of staring at unfinished blades, at the grain in the wood of your bench, at the road just beyond the village, winding away like a whisper you've never dared follow. Historians still argue whether pivotal choices came as lightning bolts or slow burns, whether the great changes of a person's life arrive with drama or silence. For you, it's the latter. No voice from the heavens, no sign in the coals, just you and a question you've carried so long. Its carved grooves in your bones. Do you stay, or do you go? You could walk away. You've thought about it 100 times. You could let the forge go cold, let the anvil rust, sell the tools to someone who doesn't know what they mean. You could become a traveler, a swordsmith for hire, or nothing at all, just a man with strong hands and a quiet past. But then what? The fire would still be there inside. The ache to create, the compulsion to shape, it wouldn't vanish. You know that now. Or you could stay. Keep your head down. Keep crafting quietly. Pretend the blade never happened. Turn down every nobleman, every warlord, every wandering mystic who comes looking. Hope they forget, but they won't, and the fire inside you, it won't forget either. You find yourself pacing the shop floor steps, falling into the same paths your father walked. His ghost lingers in the grooves, years of motion pressed into wood. He never chose. Not really. He accepted. He endured. You don't know if he ever regretted it. You don't know if you'll do the same. The blade has become a symbol, not just to others, to you. Proof that you're more than a village fixture, that you can make something extraordinary, that you have something in you worth chasing. But symbols come with costs, and not everyone wants you to rise. There's a knock on the door. You don't answer. Not yet. You sit listening to the silence that follows. No second knock. Just the sound of wind through the forge rafters, and your own pulse thudding in your ears. You walk to the workbench, pick up the hammer. It's heavier today. You turn it over in your hand, feel the worn grip, the familiar balance. You raise it once, let it fall. The sound echoes through the space. The decision doesn't announce itself. It arrives in motion, in breath, in the weight of the tool. You know what you're going to do. You won't melt the blade. You won't bury it. But you won't chase the crown either. You'll make your own path. You'll decide job by job, piece by piece, who gets your work. You'll set your price not in coin, but in conviction. And if they threaten, you'll be ready. Not just with steel, with resolve. You're not the village blacksmith anymore. Not entirely, but you're not done here yet. You look to the doorway. The light there feels different, cooler, cleaner. You pick up your hammer and take a step. The forge feels different today. It's not the weather, not the materials, not even the work. It's something in the air, a tension that coils around your chest, tight and pulsing. You woke with it. You've carried it with you through every motion of the morning. Now, as you stoke the fire, adjust the bellows and set steel to heat, it presses against your spine like a question you already know the answer to. This might be the last time. You don't say it aloud, but the thought wraps around you like smoke. It lingers in your breath, rides. The hammer swings, settles in the hiss of the quench tank. You're not making anything grand. Just a simple tool, a curved blade for a farmer whose old one snapped at the hilt. It's the kind of job you've done 1,000 times. Nothing ceremonial, nothing heroic. But your hands move with extra care, like they know this piece is more than it seems. Each strike feels final, like punctuation. You lose yourself in the rhythm, letting it anchor you. The hammer rises, falls, rises again. Sparks flare, sweat drips. Your arms move on their own, but your mind is somewhere else, drifting through memory. Your first burn, the sound of your father's voice, gravel and smoke, the look in the stranger's eyes when he held your blade, the flicker of pride, the weight of it. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths understood the power of legacy or simply did what they were told. You know now the work becomes memory. Every blade, every hinge, every nail, tiny echoes of who you were when you made them. You finish the blade and hold it up to the light. It catches the glow just right. Clean, balanced, yours. You test the edge against a strip of leather. It slices through without resistance. You nod, satisfied. But something deeper than satisfaction is stirring, something quieter, heavier. You quench the blade, set it aside to cool. The steam rises in a gentle coil, and for a second, it looks like a wraith drifting toward the rafters. A farewell. You walk through the forge one last time, trailing your fingers along the workbench, the tool, rack the anvil. Everything worn, familiar. Everything in its place. You pause by the hammer rack. Yours, the one your father passed down, is still there. The handle smooth from years of grip. The head slightly chipped on one corner. You pick it up, turn it in your hands. Then slowly, gently, you set it back. It's not just a tool. It's a symbol. And today you're leaving it behind. You step outside, the door creaking behind you. The village is quiet. The path that curves up toward the forest glows with early sunlight. Mist lingers over the fields, softening everything. You take a breath. The weight of the forge, the fire, the endless repetition, it's still with you. In your shoulders, in your chest. But it's shifting, not a burden anymore. A memory. You glance back once. The forge stands still, its chimney puffing a thin ribbon of smoke. You wonder if someone else will light that fire someday. If they'll find your hammer. If they'll feel the same tug in their bones. Maybe they will, maybe not. You walk to the edge of the road where the dirt path meets grass. You crouch, place the finished blade in a cloth, wrap it tight. You leave it by the doorstep of the farmer's cottage. No payment, no note. Just a job finished clean and quiet. Then you stand. Then you walk. Each step away from the forge feels lighter. Not easy, never that, but clearer. Like something has been loosened finally. Behind you, the final strike still echoes in the walls. Ahead of you, the open road. You don't go far. Not at first. You spend a few nights on the hill above the village, sleeping beneath a sky so wide, it makes you feel small in a way. The forge never could. The stars flicker like forge sparks scattered infinite burning, their own quiet stories into the darkness. Your body aches in all the old familiar ways, but something inside has gone strangely quiet, not numb calm, like the roar of the forge has finally lowered to a whisper. You stretch out your limbs, breathe deeper. The air tastes different out here, and yet you still feel it. That ember in your chest, it hasn't gone out. On the third morning, you hear footsteps in the grass, light, hesitant. You glance up and see him, a boy, maybe 9, maybe 10. His tunic's too big. His sandals are frayed and his arms are folded tight like he's holding in a question too big for his mouth. But his eyes, that's what catches you. Wide, bright, watching. You're the smith, he says. You nod. Technically not anymore. But arguing with children is a waste of breath. He fidgets, then reaches into a satchel and pulls out something small. A broken dagger rusted bent at the tip the kind village children find buried in riverbeds or under old sheds. A relic, or at least a mystery. Can you fix it? He asks, holding it out like an offering. You take it. Gently feel the jagged edge, the flaking spine. It's not worth fixing, not really. But that's not what this moment is about. Not for him. You ask, what's your name? He tells you. You repeat it slow and even, like you're etching it into memory. You gesture for him to sit beside you. He does legs, swinging off the edge of the hill, the village stretched out below like a toy diorama. You hand him back the dagger. You want to learn how to make one. He nods. Historians still argue whether trades like blacksmithing were passed down only through blood, or if they sometimes skipped the rules and found their way into the hands of outsiders, strays, orphans, dreamers. You're starting to believe that craft finds its own heirs, that fire recognizes fire. You tell him about iron, about tempering, about how steel sings when it's ready. He listens like you're reading from a book no one else can see. He asks how you learned. You pause. Think of your father, of silence, of pain that taught more than words ever did. You shrug. I watched. He nods like that makes perfect sense. You spend the rest of the day sketching shapes in the dirt with a stick. He copies you, badly at first, then less badly. He doesn't complain when his hands get dirty, doesn't flinch when you hand him a dull blade and show him how to hold it right. You see something familiar in the way he grips it, tentative then certain. He'll be strong one day. If he keeps at it, if he learns to listen to the metal. Later he tells you where he lives. It's not far from the forge. His family is poor. He says his father was a tanner, but the chemicals made him sick. His mother weaves baskets. He doesn't know what he wants to be, but you can guess. You walk him back just before sundown. His mother thanks you wary but grateful. You nod. Say nothing. You watch the boy vanish into the house. For a moment you stand there thinking about the weight of the hammer, the hiss of the quench, the ghosts still resting on the forge floor, and you wonder, should you pass on the craft, start again, shape another pair of hands to carry the fire forward? Or should you leave it behind, break the cycle? There's no easy answer, but the boy's eyes, those bright, wanting eyes, they stay with you. And in them you see a flicker, not obligation, not fear, hope. You walk back to the hill as night falls. The path lit by moonlight and memory, the fire inside you, it's still warm. Maybe not finished after all. The forge is cold. You return one last time, just as the sun breaks over the village roofs, casting golden light across the soot-streaked windows. The door groans when you push it open. The air inside is stale, thick with memories and metal. You move through it slowly, touching nothing but seeing everything. Here your father's old apron still hanging from its peg, stiff with years of ash and sweat. There the bench where you split your knuckle clean open, bled onto steel and didn't stop working. And beyond that, the anvil scarred and stubborn, like it always waited for someone who would understand it fully. You don't light the fire. You don't need to. Some things are better left at rest. The boy was here yesterday, just for a minute. He handed you a piece of charcoal wrapped in cloth, his first sketch. It was crude, charming, confident in the way only a child's line work can be. You told him to come back in a week. You don't know if you meant it. You moved to the back room. There, beneath the cot, still wrapped in its oiled cloth, lies the blade, the one that changed everything. You don't unwrap it. You just rest your hand on it for a moment, and then you leave it. Some things don't belong on walls. Some stories aren't finished, but they still need a pause. Historians still argue whether great craftsmen faded into obscurity or walked away on their own terms, whether the end was chosen or inherited. You'll never write your version, but the act of leaving will speak for itself. You step out into the morning light, squinting. The forge behind you looms smaller already, still there, still capable, but no longer yours, not entirely. At the edge of the village, you pass the baker's daughter. She watches you with wide eyes, then nods once. Respectful. No words. You nod back. You carry nothing. No hammer, no blade, just a small satchel and whatever's left in your lungs. You pass the fields, the fences, the crooked tree with the hanging rope, swing weathered and still. The wind tugs gently at your sleeves. It smells like pine and dust and change. At the edge of the forest, the road curves out of sight. You pause. Look back once. Not in longing, just acknowledgement. Then you step forward and disappear into the trees. The forest closes gently behind you. The sun filters through high branches, dappling the path in soft patches of gold. Your footsteps are quiet now, cushioned by moss, and the hush of wind threading through the canopy above. There is no destination, just motion, just breath, just the warmth of your limbs stretching into a world that no longer feels like a cage. Each step away from the forge is a step into yourself. You're not running. You're not hiding. You're becoming. The hammer's weight is gone, but its memory lingers in your shoulders. The rhythm of fire and steel pulses beneath your skin, faint, steady, familiar. Not as a burden, as a part of you. Always there, even without the anvil's ring. The road ahead bends. You don't rush it. You walk slow, allowing silence to settle in your chest. Your thoughts soften. Your heartbeat slows. There is peace here, and possibility. Maybe the fire will find you again. In another place, in another form. Or maybe it's enough to have carried it this far. Whatever happens, you are no longer bound. You are no longer shaped by obligation. You are shaping yourself. Now sleep. Let your mind rest. Your breath deepen your body. Surrender to the stillness around you. The journey is behind you. The path ahead can wait. The forest closes gently behind you. The sun filters through high branches, dappling the path in soft patches of gold. Your footsteps are quiet now, cushioned by moss, and the hush of wind threading through the canopy above. There is no destination, just motion, just breath, just the warmth of your limbs stretching into a world that no longer feels like a cage. Each step away from the forge is a step into yourself. You're not running. You're not hiding. You're becoming. The hammer's weight is gone, but its memory lingers in your shoulders. The rhythm of fire and steel pulses beneath your skin, faint, steady, familiar, not as a burden, as a part of you, always there even without the anvil's ring. The road ahead bends. You don't rush it. You walk slow, allowing silence to settle in your chest. Your thoughts soften. Your heartbeat slows. There is peace here and possibility. Maybe the fire will find you again, in another place, in another form. Or maybe it's enough to have carried it this far. Whatever happens, you are no longer bound. You are no longer shaped by obligation. You are shaping yourself. Now sleep. Let your mind rest, your breath deepen. Your body surrender to the stillness around you. The journey is behind you. The path ahead can wait. Good night.